Hello and welcome to another episode of Draft Gym TV. As always, you are joined by me, Andy, and you can find me on Twitter as FPL Mode. So, we are only 4 days away from the official launch of the FanTeam Euro 2020 Daily Fantasy Competition. £1 million prize pool to be won. God, we're getting close now. So, what I thought we could do now, we've gone through all our predicted lineups. We've gone through some teams that people have sent me through and having a look at those and seeing whether we can improve on them. Today we're going to be looking at dilemmas and questions. Now, as always, if you're liking what you're seeing on the video, make sure you like and subscribe, and make sure you're visiting our website as well, draftgym.com. Amazing website. The content coming out of there is absolutely incredible. If you like articles rather than watching stuff, it really is worth a look, so make sure you do. So today we're going to be looking, we've got a few questions from the Twitter folk that have a few dilemmas and a few questions they want to ask, and we're going to do our best to answer them. Some of the questions I've actually given you visual aids to help you and to help me as well. And as always, we have got our amazing ticker underneath us talking you through all of the information before the Euros start. That will be updated when we're doing our live streams coming up soon as well. So let's jump straight into it then. And we have got a question from Bullstar. Bullstar's asking, which player do you think could be the shock success in the group stage, and who do you think could be the biggest flop? Now, if we're looking at shock success in the group stage, now that for me means not a premium player. That means a player that is cheaper and maybe playing for a team that we're not expecting to do very well. For me, I really like the look of Turkey. I think Turkey could be quite good. Yilmaz is 4.5 million. Is it a shock because he's going to be in a lot of teams? Maybe not, but I do think they could do quite well. Not in their first game, but in their second two games. I think Poland could do fairly well. I think with Lewandowski up front, they've always got that definite goal scorer, and I think that's what a lot of teams are missing. And people like Zielinski, I think, could be quite good too. I do like the look of Austria. I think Alaba is a good player. I think they've got their defence looks quite good, especially for that first game. So I think in terms of shock successes, I think I'm going to have to go. I think we're going to go for Turkey. But for some reason, as this has gone on, as the build-up's gone on, I've started looking at Sweden more and more. And I've started looking at teams like Ukraine as well. So there's some other teams I am looking at. But I think if you had to really push me, I think I'm going to go for Turkey. And then who do I think could be the biggest flop? I do not like anything I'm hearing from the Netherlands at the moment. I am getting really worried about this Holland team. I think Depay is still a good pick because I think even though there's all this disruption with them, he still seems to be returning in their friendlies. But if you're looking at players like Wijnaldum and Vendel and people like that, I'm getting really worried about this team. It looks like a good group, but I'm starting to get worried that this disharmony in the team is going to affect their performances. So for me, Netherlands are going to... It's tough. I'm sticking my neck out here. And, you know, it's boring if I just sat on the fence all the time. So I'm going to stick my neck out and I'm going to say that Netherlands are going to be the big flop and big disappointment. I could be so wrong here. They could storm this group, but just something seems a little bit off with them at the moment. So I'm going to go for that. We have had a little bit of news tonight that says that Spain squad is all in isolation. So it could very easily be them. So that's something to keep an eye out, definitely. Our next question is from Clean Sheet Wipeout. He is asking, seeing a lot holding funds to go from Ronaldo to Kane in game week 2. However, do you think it's better to go to Mbappe over Kane if you have neither to start with? I really like this question because these are the kind of questions you need to be asking yourself. Now, I think you need to watch game week 1 to see what happens first. I think France obviously have Germany, and if France can do one over Germany and do really well in that one, and Mbappe gets a goal or gets a goal and assist or something like that, I think it's going to be really hard to not go with Mbappe, considering they've got maybe an easier fixture coming up with Hungary. But then Kane, if he does well against Croatia, obviously they then got the Czech Republic next. I think it's going to be tough to choose between these two. If I am looking at it myself and just completely my opinion, I think I would be favouring Mbappe. And it's just because of how explosive Mbappe can be. I feel like France are a better unit and a better team than England. And so because of that, I've got to go with a player and the team that I would back more than the other. So I think I would be going Mbappe over Kane. A lot of people will be getting Kane in. But I think England are just as likely to struggle to a 1-0 win over the Czech Republic, whereas Mbappe, I just fancy this France team in any fixture they play, and Mbappe is so integral as well. Yes, Kane is too, but if you're putting a gun to my head and saying who would I pick, I would be going Mbappe over Kane. Ideally, you'd have both. If you could have both, that would be perfect. Start with Kane in your team, start with Mbappe in your team, and then move someone like Ronaldo to one or the other. Yes, it hurts the rest of your team, but you're probably going to be captaining Mbappe or Kane, aren't you? So for me, I think it is worth it. It's a tough one, but I do think Mbappe would be the one I would be going for. We've got another question here from Dougal, oi Dougal, and he is asking, Malinowski, Forsberg or Malinowski, who's your favourite 5.5 midfielder? Do you know what? Compared to the official Euro game, the value we've got in midfield in this one is absolutely brilliant. Malinowski I love, Forsberg I love, Malinowski I love. Great players for 5.5 million, just as enablers, I think is absolutely fantastic. The big thing about all these three players is they have got tough opening fixtures. Forsberg has Spain, Malinowski has Italy, Malinowski has somebody I can't remember for the Ukraine. Netherlands, isn't it? I am thinking for 5.5 million, these are the guys that should be sitting on your bench and then you unleash them in match day 2 and match day 3. If you had to ask me now which one's my favourite, I think in order, I think Malinowski would be last. I think the Ukraine are more of a frustration kind of team where they will frustrate opponents and maybe not have as much going forward. Also, I think there was a rumour that Malinowski was on penalties, but they played in a friendly tonight and it was Yarmolenko and Zinchenko that took the penalty. So I'm wondering whether Malinowski isn't actually on them. It does look like Yarmolenko is going to be the main man if he's starting. So I think Malinowski would be the last pick for me, although I do like him as an option with those Ukraine fixtures in match day 2 and 3. Then it's a bit of a toss-up for me between Malinowski and Forsberg. I do like Forsberg. As I was saying before, I do quite like this Swedish team. So these are really close. But if, again, and I'm having to make the tough decisions here, that's what this stream is all about, I would favour Malinowski. Personally, I really like the double up with Yilmaz. I think for 10 million, which is what you're going to be spending on, I really like that double up. So I think it would be for me, Malinowski first, then Forsberg, then Malinowski. I think I would always make sure with these enablers that I have a double up on the bench. So for instance, if I've got Forsberg, I'd be looking to get Isaac on my bench as well. So I have that double up to come in for match day 2 and 3 and I don't need to worry about him again. If I had Malinowski, I'd be almost certainly having Yilmaz on the bench as well, because then I can bring them in for match day 2 and 3. It's something that I've always talked about stacking. It's less important when you've got a tournament-long competition, but at the same time, we're only thinking about 3 games. And if you've got Malinowski and Yilmaz, or you've got Forsberg and Isaac that can come off the bench in match day 2 and 3, I think you're going to be really, really happy with that. You could maybe swap those around as well. You could have Malinowski and Isaac, and you could have Forsberg and Yilmaz, but I do like the stacks. I think the stacks, if it goes well, you're loving life, and you only need them to win the game, and you're getting 0.3, 0.6 because there's 2 of them extra points. So I think that's the way I'll be going. So for me, it would be Malinowski, then Forsberg, then Malinowski. But you need to be able to know that match day 1 that you're probably not going to be playing them personally. Right. We also have a question from FPL Elf. He is asking, can you highlight 2 teams whose defence could be worth targeting? 1 big team and 1 lesser team. I'm going to be a little bit out of it here. I'm actually going to mention 2 teams for the big teams. I think the teams that I have been targeting the most defensively are Italy, and I think a lot of people will have them in their team. A lot of people will have them double defence as well. So if you're going to go in without any Italy, I think you could be struggling a little bit if they do as well defensively as we think they're going to do. So I do back this Italy team as well defensively. I think they've always been known for defensive ability. Yes, they played well in a friendly the other day, but I still don't see them be able to do that in the tournament. I think they're going to go defensive first, keep the clean sheet, and then see what happens. So I do like their double defence. Also, I love the fact they're so cheap as well. 5.5 million for Bonucci, 5.5 million for Spinazzola. Nothing wrong with that at all. So I think that's the big team I'll target. Just an honourable mention though, Spain as well. I think Spain have a lovely group for keeping clean sheets. It's just if you can pick those nailed defenders. I think Jordi Alba's most likely going to start. I think Pau Torres, Laporte, most likely going to start. Simon in goal, potentially. So I think they're probably going to be my two big teams I'll be targeting defensively. One lesser team defensively, I really like Austria. I think Austria, there's nothing wrong with them, especially in match day 1. I think I'm struggling to double up on their defence because I don't want them past match day 1. So that match day 2 fixture all of a sudden doesn't look quite as nice. So I think I will definitely have at least one Austrian defender in my team. And then, I'm going to go with Ukraine. I've been looking at Ukraine more and more, and I think they could do well defensively in this group. So I would probably be looking at a Ukrainian defender as well. And then again for two attacking teams. Now for me, easily, the team that I've been looking at the most for attacking is Belgium. I think Belgium have a lovely group. I think they should be the top goal scorers in the tournament probably after the group stage. Great for Lukaku. I think Lukaku should be in most teams, especially if you only got one entry. I think you need to have Lukaku in it. Tough picking another player though. Eden Hazard is most probably not going to be fit for the first game, or will only get 15-20 minutes, which is not what we want, especially when you consider he could be rested for match day 3, so you're only really getting a game out of him. And then after that, it's a bit tough. Yuri Tillemans could be on set pieces, but it's not that great. Meunier Castagna, not looking great either, could be rotated. So it's really tough finding another player that you could have for Belgium. Thorgan Hazard is somebody you could consider, but he is playing left wing back most of the time. But then he is getting returns from left wing back. So if you're that way inclined, he's expensive, but you get what you pay for, I think. So I think that's definitely the team I'll be looking at in terms of a premium team that are going to be attacking. In terms of a lesser team that I think could be attacking, I think it's quite a tough one because a lot of these lesser teams aren't necessarily going to be attacking. I think they're going to be trying to make sure they get out of the group and try to get these draws. But I do like Poland. I like Lewandowski. Yes, he's not cheap, but I like Zielinski as well. I think he's a very, very good player. As I said, I have been looking at Sweden. I have been looking at Isaac and Forsberg and Berg. I think they could be players that come into the fore a little bit as it goes on. And I've also been looking at Croatia a little bit as well. I think after Croatia play England, they then potentially have to get a win in one of their last games because England might potentially beat them in that first game. And I have been plugging Modric into my bench a little bit. It's tough to go for somebody like Perisic because he's a striker in this game, so it's tough to justify spending 8 million on him. But I do like the look of somebody like Modric on your bench that you could bring in when they're having to win games in the last 2 games, and then they could, go on a bit of an attacking flurry. So I do quite like those as well. But if I had to pick only 2, I think it'd be Belgium, and then I'm going to go for Sweden. Could be the worst decision I've ever made, but I'm going to go for Sweden. Right, we've got another question here from Rover. He's got a more specific question. He is saying, if you had to pick 2 from this set, which would it be? So A, Lukaku against Russia and Denmark. B, Depay against Ukraine and Austria. C, Kane against Croatia and Scotland. Or D, Ronaldo or Mbappe against Hungary. So, if I only had to pick 2, I think the Croatia game rules me out of Kane. I think Kane I've been fading quite a lot on a lot of my teams, so I would probably go against Kane, which sounds horrible as an Englishman, but I probably would. I think for me, I would go Lukaku and Depay. I think Depay could have a lot of joy in this group. Yes, I've said about the Netherlands not being so good, but I think Depay is still doing well despite that, and that is lovely for me, because if they do turn up and it's all okay, then straight away Depay is going to be hitting the ground running, but I think he could still do okay even if they're not very good as the sum of their parts, if that makes sense. And Lukaku, he could just be an absolute beast in this tournament. Belgium looks so good. They've got a lovely, lovely group. So I think Lukaku and Depay would be the 2 I would go for. But that Ronaldo and Mbappe one, it might tempt me a little bit. But that's probably what I would go for myself. Now, you'll notice we got a bit of a graphic underneath here. Motley Barnett has asked a question, and he's also kind of answered it a little bit later on for himself. So I did ask him, I said, do you mind if I steal your little table here, because I love it? And he said, yeah, that's absolutely fine. Friend of the videos anyway, because we've obviously been dissecting his best of teams from the earlier videos. He's said he's got a couple of questions. Number 1, do you think travel will affect players? Now, I didn't really look into this much until Motley was talking to me about this in another group. And if you have a look underneath here, we have got all the teams and how much they're going to be travelling during the tournament. Netherlands, Denmark, travelling less than 150 miles throughout the entire tournament. Lovely. When I say the entire tournament, the group stages. When you look at Switzerland, Sweden, Poland, they're all doing more than 5,000 miles to play all of their games. Now, you've got to ask yourself, is this something that is going to affect your choosing of players? Is this going to be something that affects your selection of certain players? Now, I think there's two ways of looking at this. One way is this overthinking? Is this overthinking? Yes, they've got to travel. Of course they've got to travel. And it's more travelling than they would normally do in a normal tournament. But are you going to not pick Lewandowski in your team because he's going to travel 5,000 miles? I don't think so. For me, I think the other way of looking at it is, does this really matter? And are you just overthinking everything? I think the thing that worries me the most is there's such a vast difference between how much some teams are travelling. 5,700 miles for Switzerland, 124 for the Netherlands. That is a massive difference. So maybe Switzerland, Sweden, Poland, Croatia are all going to be maybe a little bit more lethargic, whereas Netherlands, Denmark, Hungary are going to be a little less. I'm not going to be factoring it in, I don't think. I think that's the way I'm going. Yes, it's good to look at, but I think this is one of those things where you can look at it and think, oh, look at all this stuff that's making me think otherwise. And I don't think I'm going to factor it into my thinking at all. I think as soon as you start doing that, you do start overthinking things. Look, Belgium are fifth on this list. They're travelling over 4,000 miles. Are you going to not pick any Belgian players? No, they're one of the best teams in the tournament, so I don't think I will. Denmark and Hungary are at the bottom. Does that mean you're going to be picking triple Hungary? No. So I don't think I'm going to be factoring it into my transfers or into my squad selection personally, but I do love that question. And then question 2, have you prepared for possible match day 3 rotation? There is a lot of chat at the moment in a lot of the communities I'm in about what we're going to do about match day 3 rotation. What we're going to do if France win their first 2 games. And then they field a completely different team in match day 3. If you look back through at match day 3 in the World Cup and Euros in the last couple of times they've been played, match day 3 has been a nightmare for rotation. My worry, if you're trying to plan it in, best laid plans of mice and men, you can try and plan it in, and then all of a sudden it's a different team that tops the group. Could very well happen. We see it every single year. You're looking at Spain and thinking, oh, they might rotate in match day 3. And then all of a sudden, it's Sweden that tops the group and Spain have to win in match day 3. I am, again, not paying too much credence to this, if I'm honest, just because it could go so wrong. You could plan it absolutely perfectly, which is fine. But at the same time, you could spend a lot of your time making sure you've got a squad for match day 3 that will be rotation, just completely protected from rotation, and then all of a sudden it all gets turned on its head, and now you've got a team where you've spent all that time making sure you've got a good team for match day 3, and now you don't. So for me, I'm not worrying about it too much. I think a lot of people will be in the same boat anyway, and if a lot of people are in the same boat anyway, then I wouldn't worry about it too much. It does make you think, is late registration a good idea? Come in after match day 2, get the average of everybody, and then have a beautiful team for match day 3 that you know will play. But even then, are you really going to know the teams? Are you going to know who's going to play? I think last time when Belgium played England, they completely rotated, and it was Januzaj and Batshuayi up front. I mean, if you can call that, fair enough. But I think you're probably playing with fire a little bit if you're trying to guess rotation. It's almost like pep roulette, isn't it? You're playing with fire a bit, and I just don't think the risk of doing it is going to outweigh the reward that you get afterwards, personally. So I'm not going to be thinking about it too much anyway. I'm just going to hope that it all lands in my lap. Right, we've got some more questions here from James Alaprin, Scottish fan. And he is asking, have you considered home advantage for co-host nations? Have a little bit. You'll notice with me, I'm quite a simple manager. I'm not somebody that thinks too much about all these different things, because I think it kind of starts to go into a bit of a narrative, and then all of a sudden people aren't picking certain players when they're perfectly good players. So have I considered home advantage? Not massively. There are some players that do have good home advantage. I know Denmark's one of them. I won't be thinking about, when I'm picking my players, when I'm picking my captains, I'm not going to be thinking about it too much. Number 4, what transfer usage are you planning on group stages? By the way, if you're wondering why he started question 3, it's because he's followed on from Motley Barnett's tweet. What transfer usage are you planning on group stages? As much as possible, in as many entries as possible, I'm going to be rolling that transfer in match day 1. and then just keep with the same team for match day 2. There's no reason why you can't set up a team for 2 match weeks. There's no reason whatsoever. You should be fine doing that. Yes, you could have injuries and things like that, but I think you should be able to at least get 2 weeks out of your players. And then in match day 3, when all that rotation could potentially happen and we have a bit more information, I'm hoping to use those 2 transfers. Question 5, what's your thought process on taking hits? I'm going to avoid hits like the plague if I can. I think my worry about taking hits, one, is that I don't think a lot of people are going to be taking hits. So all of a sudden you're -4 down, potentially -3 based on the average. And also, there's no guarantee the player you're bringing in is going to be playing. It's going to be really tough to know that. Unless a team is still really going for it, it's really tough to know whether that player is going to be playing. So I'm going to be very I'm going to be very hits adverse in this tournament, I think. I think when you get to the very end of the tournament, it could be a little bit better, but you get a few more transfers then anyway. So I think I would be against hits as much as possible. There are situations where they could work, but for me, I think I'd probably be against it. And question 6, are you entering any late teams? I think there's something to be said for entering late teams. I think getting the average of all the other teams and being somewhere in the middle when you're a late team, and then picking your team based on who you can see is doing really well and has nice fixtures later on, could be a way to go. So I'm not completely against it. I don't think I will be entering any late teams myself because I just like doing it the whole way through, but I can see why some people would do it, but I just don't think it's for me this time round. And then our last question is from Rob Pick, and he is a Draft Gym member, and he is asking, are Spain being overlooked, and who do you think the best options are? Simon at 6 million in goal feels viable to me, and think there's some good options considering their group. Spain, I would put in the same bracket as the Netherlands for me. I'm not sure what Spain is going to turn up, if I'm perfectly honest. They've got a nice group. They should score some goals in this group. They should keep some clean sheets. Do I see Spain definitely topping the group? No. If I had to put money on it, I'd say they would, but am I completely confident on it? No, I'm not. I think their team is tough to call. There's a lot of rotation that could happen in this team, a lot of question marks. I said that in my stream actually before, my video before. But when you look down, there are some options. I think if we just look down that list I've got there, Alvaro Morata is tough to pick, I think, because it could easily be Gerard Moreno up front. If it is Moreno, by the way, he's a very good pick. Then you've got Ferran Torres. He is the player I think is most likely to be nailed and is probably my favourite pick out of this Spain team. Oyarzabal, I wouldn't be touching. Olmo, I think, is not quite secure as he was before, so I think he's a tough ask. I would go for Torres for 1 million more every day of the week. Llorente will most probably be playing wing back, which, if he does play, limits his upside, especially as an 8 million midfielder. Moreno, if he starts, I think is a good pick. 8 million, really like that pick. And then as you go down, Koke is going to be limited because he's going to be kind of that playmaker in midfield. And then Thiago's not going to play. Rodri's defensive. De Gea won't play. It will be Simon. I don't mind Simon at 6 million, by the way. Just need to make sure he's definitely starting. Jordi Alba, 6.5 million though. It's a lot of money, but I think he probably will start. So yes, there are options in this Spanish team. I think if you were doing more than one entry, I think you'd have to have an entry that has no Spain, just completely fade them completely. And then you'd also have to have an entry where you got triple Spain. That's what I've done. So I think that's the way I'd be going with Spain. So they are our questions. I hope you enjoyed looking through them as much as I enjoyed answering them. I do really enjoy this kind of stuff, actually, so thank you for listening. Remember, if we've answered any of your questions or if you've enjoyed the answers, make sure you like and subscribe. We've only got 4 days left. We've got one more stream coming up, and it will be a live stream, our first ever one on Wednesday, so make sure you tune into that. I'll be answering all your questions, talking about my drafts as well, talking about a few of mine, so make sure you do get in and join us for that. Make sure you like and subscribe. Make sure you get your teams in, because there's nothing worse than being there on the night before and trying to get as many entries in as possible. So, from all of us at Draft Gym and from me, Andy, FPL Teach Mode, we wish you luck and oi oi.